and gentlemen, I am so pleased to present Connie Carpenter Phinney. Connie is the co-founder of the Davis Phinney Foundation for Parkinson's. She's an entrepreneur, artist, mother, and lifelong athlete. Please welcome the 1984 Olympic gold medalist, Connie Carpenter Phinney.
Is everyone content tonight? So we start there. I haven't seen that on a big screen before, and it's really lovely. I think they came to me and asked me if they could do a story through me about Boulder. And actually, they came to my son, and he wasn't available. It's pretty much the story of my life. Sometimes I get speaking gigs because they want Davis, and he's not available. In fact, they probably asked him to come here tonight. Did they? So, one of the producers had actually gone to high school here in Boulder. And I think that really helped because he didn't live here any longer, but he had a real passion for Boulder and for what it meant to him as a high school kid. When they first came to me and they wanted to do this story about Boulder, I said, well, I don't really love Boulder as much as I used to, so I might not be the best person. And then that's where a lot of us are going like this, right? Because a lot of you are my age, which is 60, by the way. But there's things I like about Boulder. And I do remember that first drive across Nebraska and Colorado and coming to Boulder and what it meant to me. So I think I want to tell you a little story, starting with the '84 Olympics, and then kind of backpedal into how I got there and how I got here, all right? I've been working on a memoir of sorts and have really discovered that my stories are better told verbally than in writing. So having said that, it is written down, a short piece that I'm going to read to you, but I've been working with my daughter, Kelsey, on trying to make it into a podcast series because for me, storytelling is such an art form, and it's why I'm here tonight, to share my story. And so what I want to do is start with basically the reason I was invited here, which is July 29th, 1984, around noon. Mission Viejo, California. Let's start with the heavy, shiny metal attached to a surprisingly colorful ribbon draped around my slender, freckled neck, and the tiny bouquet of spiky flowers in my hand. Let's start with that version of me. Long and lean, supremely fit, on the top step, on the top of my game. Let's start with that familiar song, our national anthem. The Star-Spangled Banner, and the Southern California heat and the bright blue sky. Let's start with how a 2-hour bike race would forever label me. For the rest of my life, champion, Olympic champion. You want to know what it felt like. I get that. It's normal. Winning the Olympics is not normal. What did it feel like? What did it feel like? A huge, sweeping, overwhelming joy quickly subsides into an intense relief tinged with a strong sense of, please pinch me so I know I'm not dreaming. My reaction didn't have words. My reaction had a huge smile and an overwhelming desire to hug everyone in sight. The podium was sequestered deep into the secure area, and the time passed as if in a luxurious dream. Scanning the crowds from this perch, I realized that my family and friends were much too far away to recognize. Only Olympic dignitaries, race officials, course marshals, policemen, and media were in my proximity. Truth be told, I felt more like a fish in a fishbowl than the main actor on a live stage. I was mute, respectful, shy even. The assembled people were gawking. The cameras were incessantly rolling. For all my imagining of winning of this moment, I had dared not to write the script for this part. What do I do? How do I stand? So I focused on the sky, on my breath, the flags, and the music. The anthem played from somewhere. I would say, "Can you see by the dawn's early light?" For me. It was playing for me. I faced the raising flags with my mind and heart so full that they were almost bursting in air. And then all too quickly, "And the home of the brave." My cue. I turned back. I raised my arms now and I'm waving to you. To you. I'm smiling at you, at home, on TV. Because no one else I know is in front of me. But let me back up just a tad to just after the finish of the race. Davis and I hugged 100 meters after I lunged to the line. Those of you who have seen images of the race, remember the race, know that I won. Well, if it were a fish story, I won by that much. But in truth in telling, it was that much. We stumbled and slipped to the ground. It was chaotic, and I said, "I think I won." I think I whispered it, but maybe I shouted it because it was so loud. The crowd was going ballistic. USA had gone 1 and 2. By the time I stood on the podium, Davis was far into his own pre-race ritual and lost from my sight in the team area. The pressure was on him now. His wife had won. Sorry, honey. Maybe they didn't ask you here first. I don't know. We, the women's field, made history by just standing on the starting line. No female cyclist had ever lined up to race the Olympics before 1984. Never. Not before that day, July 29th, 1984, the opening day of competition for those Olympic Games in Los Angeles. It was the 23rd running of the modern Olympic Games. Why it had taken so long for women to be included is a story for another time. The amateur men's race, and yes, the Olympics in those days were amateur. Would last a grueling 12 laps. Ours was 5, and it was enough. The heat, the crowd noise were rising by the hour. We, Davis and I, had thrived under pressure and loved to race before a crowd, but never had we dreamed of racing before such a large and extremely partisan crowd. Did I mention loud? You couldn't hear yourself breathe. You couldn't hear yourself think. After the chaotic finish, I changed into a dry suit for the awards. I combed my damp, long hair. I did have a mullet in those days. You're judging me. I accepted congratulations from other competitors and those allowed in the athlete zone, and I tried to calm myself and started to make my way to the awards area. We still had 30 minutes to wait before the medal ceremony, with the last rider finishing. Wait, where's a phone? I asked the volunteer escort. Phone? Telephone? Everyone that I asked just shrugged. I said, there has to be a phone. I thought, I can't just stand here. A phone? Phone? In the pre-internet, pre-cell phone age, do you remember that? I had to go in search of a landline. My mom couldn't travel to watch me, so my dad stayed with her at our family home in Madison, Wisconsin, and I wanted to talk to them on the telephone. Now. Stat! But how? Where? I had an idea, and I beelined toward the finish area and climbed up the scaffolding into the makeshift announcer's booth, where Al Michaels, Greg LeMond, and Eric Heiden were ensconced doing commentary for ABC. They were on a break and chatting when I peeked inside. Hi, excuse me, how's it going, guys? Would you mind if can I use your phone? Please? Carp, congratulations, said Eric enthusiastically. We'd known each other most of forever. I've got a long way to go to catch up to you, my friend. Hayden, you'll remember, won 5 gold medals in Lake Placid Olympics, and was also from my hometown of Madison and shared the sport I also did before cycling, that speed skating. But I didn't have the luxury of multiple events, just one Olympic medal. It would have to be enough. It was enough. And it was still sinking in, permeating each and every cell in my body, making my legs a bit wobbly, or maybe it was the exertion. In any case, I sat down. I grabbed the phone and I dialed my childhood phone number, 608. It was a rotary phone. It took a few minutes before I heard the ringing. And it just kept ringing. No one was answering. You gotta be kidding me. I rolled my eyes. I was kind of desperate. I was getting a little angry. What? Ring, ring. Kept ringing. I was frowned. I was impatient. I fidgeted. Had they forgotten? What the heck? I was getting worried. Maybe my dad had a heart attack. Race was close. After too many rings to count, I was ready to hang up when my mom answered, out of breath. My mom was never out of breath. She didn't move quickly enough to get out of breath, pure and simple. Now you're going to be sorry you laughed. My mom had multiple sclerosis. And this had slowed her down, impeded her gait, and wreaked havoc with her balance. I had no recollection ever of my mother winded. Winded? Mom, geez, what the heck, where were you? Yep, those are my first words to my parents after winning the Olympics. Great job, my dad interjected, you did it. And I could feel his smile, and I longed for his bear hug of an embrace. Their voices were an oasis amidst this chaos, and verification that, in fact, I wasn't dreaming. Tears welled in my eyes. Oh dear, interjected my mom, who was still out of breath. Breathless. That was so wonderful. We were out in the backyard, shooting off fireworks. They both laughed that unrestrained, joyful laugh I had grown up with, and they were as excited as I'd ever heard them. It brought me back to earth. We had gone through a very tumultuous journey, the one that ended here in Mission Viejo on this day, together, now, with this victory. The athletic career, the prodigy, more losses than victories, more heartache and worry than I'll ever know for them. It's enough to take this journey on for yourself. But for them, it would be a long time. In fact, not until I had my own kids before I could possibly grasp how difficult it was for them. But for now, man, my parents' emotions were running wild in a way I could only imagine and only now deeply understand. This teeny tiny blip in time was the reward. Theirs and mine. This moment, I held on to it and to them. Their voices, their joy. That's what winning's about. It's about sharing it, right? Wish you were here, I said, but it's a zoo. It's probably good you're not. I miss you, though. They had seen it, me on TV, winning the Olympics. Me on TV. They'd never seen me race on TV. on the Olympics. So when you ask me, what did it feel like? I could tell you that beyond the relief and satisfaction and the initial exhilaration, that winning the Olympics is a lot like lobbing a stone into a still pond. The ripples start small and move out into vast, unknowable places, like here, right now. But first it encompasses those you know and love. I long to embrace everyone who had helped and supported me for what now seemed like my entire life. I clung to my parents' voices on the phone, fearful then of letting go or giving in to the full tsunami of emotion, until someone called from below the announcer's booth. Connie! Ooh, I smiled. They were looking for the Olympic champion. So that's my prologue. And it wouldn't have happened if I didn't live in Boulder, Colorado. Wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have met this guy, Davis Phinney. Wouldn't have happened if a number of people in this town hadn't supported me, or all the people around the world that took me in because we didn't have enough money. We were amateurs, you know, to support our habit, which was a beautiful dream, this dream of being an Olympic champion. My dream started at a really young age, though, which was very unusual for girls at that time. I can remember watching, my first Olympics that I watched was 1968 gymnastics. A lot of you picked gymnastics, I know, as your favorite sport. Back in the day, those girls were actually like 5'5" and 5'6". They were kind of normal size. And I remember noticing the Olympics. That was the first time I ever noticed the Olympics, or maybe ever saw women in a sporting event. Because where would I see that? We only had Wide World of Sports, and they were showing guys ski jumping off into the ground, you know, into the side of the track. We were seeing football, we were seeing basketball, but we didn't see women in sport. So I got into speed skating because I'm from Wisconsin. And if you know anything about Wisconsin, you know we have very cold winters. Even now, during global warming, it's still frigid. And we have no shortage of lakes and ponds, which, when it's frigid, freeze over. And we have lots of people who like to get out there and shovel the snow off so that the kids can get out there and skate. And I happen to live across the street from a school playground that was flooded every night of the winter. One half was the hockey side, the other half was free skating. There was a little Quonset head of a warming house. And my parents had the best deal on the planet because at 7 o'clock every night, the lights went on. They had strung like Christmas lights around basically the whole area of the ice rink. The lights went on and it was game time. Me and my 3 brothers were across the street as fast as we could go to skate for 2 hours. My mother got a quiet house. Half the time my dad was over there skating with us, and we had all this freedom to be out there at night moving. And I did mention it was cold in Wisconsin, right? So you have to move fast, right? So you learn to skate fast. And I loved the games we played. We had all kinds of pom-pom and capture the flag games on the ice, on the free skating side of the ice, where I could test myself and show myself and be very competitive in the game situation. But it was a blast. Nobody really kept score. It wasn't organized. We just did it every night of the winter. And so I grew up skating, and I never thought about racing. You know, it didn't occur to me that there was actually an organized aspect to this, except for that there was a Madison Speed Skating Club, and they did have this little competition every year that was sponsored by our newspaper, the Wisconsin State Journal, which had all the kids could come and do these little straight line drag sprints on one of the legs. You had to qualify, and then you went there, and there was just a ton of kids there, and everybody skated, and I usually won my little age group. But that was it. That was the extent of my competitive, it was one weekend a year. But every year the speed skating club would call me up and they would say, we see you won your second grade race. Would you like to join the speed skating club? And I'd put the phone down and say, Mom, Dad, do I want to join the speed skating club? And they'd say, nah. You don't want to do that. It takes too much time. They skate on the other side of town. Your three brothers play hockey. Girls didn't play hockey. I've gone into elementary schools and I tell girls, girls didn't play hockey then, and they're just, why? Good point. So I didn't join the speed skating club for a long time. Finally, in 6th grade, my dad kind of gave in and said, okay, let's go check out one of these races and see how it goes. So I showed up in my corduroy pants, my sweater, my beanie hat with a tassel on the top. And I get there, and everybody's basically, if you saw the speed skating suit on the way in, it wasn't like a one-piece suit, but they were definitely in like first-generation Lycra tights, all right? And there's me, I'm in my corduroy pants, my big sweater, my dull skates. I didn't think that much of it, actually. I was pretty oblivious. So I went out and skated the first race, and it was really fun. We went like half a lap. That was really fun. And then we had another race. We went a whole lap, and that was really fun. And then we had one more race, and it was a lap and a half. Whoa. So I went around the first lap, and they rang the bell after the half a lap, and I thought, what's that bell for? I didn't know what the bell meant. I thought I was doing something wrong. Like they're ringing this bell really hard, and I'm like coming, it meant it was 1 to go, right? Well, I stood up. Like, what? Everybody went by me. I was so embarrassed. I was 12 years old that I immediately went directly to the car, and I got in and I cried for the rest of the afternoon. My dad, however, went and talked to all the other parents about the club, about the races. He'd seen how fast I could skate. He knew his daughter needed an outlet, and he signed me up for the club. So that's really how I got going in speed skating. And I was 12 years old, and by the time I was 14, and I was in 9th grade, and I was at Sherman Junior High School, I made the Olympic team. I know, you think only gymnasts. This is the topic of the night, gymnasts and maybe some curling. Only gymnasts are that young when they're competing, but back then there wasn't a minimum age. And I had qualified. Malcolm Gladwell likes to talk about his 10,000 hours. I definitely did not have my 10,000 hours. I might have had my 10,000 hours on the school rink, right? I mean, across the street, but I definitely didn't have very many hours at all speed skating seriously. So, how serious could you be when you're 14? I was pretty serious. But back then, so this is 1972. 1972. Nobody was running. I mean, Frank Shorter was running kind of, probably here in Colorado where it might have been cooler to be running. But, in my town, when people were running, they'd usually rob the bank or they were, trying to get away from their brothers, like what I would have been doing. But, so in order to train, I decided I had to do some running, had to do these exercises that looked a lot worse than running, right? Like duck walking and, jumping side to side. And, I'm sure you're going to go to middle school after your friends have seen you doing that. No. you're not. So I would run and do my exercises after dark. And of course, we're in the north, so it gets dark early, which is good. But it was still dark, and my mother didn't like me running after dark. You know, this bothered her, even though we lived in a very safe neighborhood. And so one night when I was out running and I was stopping, I was doing my exercises, and this car like creeping up behind me, and I'm thinking, oh, my mom's right. There's some creep following me. Turn around, it's my mom. Making sure I'm okay. Thanks, Mom. So what I started to do, especially when I was exercising in the summer, was I would ride my bike across town. The bicycle, the freedom of the bicycle, to take me beyond my neighborhood where I could run and do whatever kind of goofy jumps I wanted to do without anybody caring, right? Because, I mean, I didn't care. They didn't care because they didn't know me. And so, and I would meet the club, and we would do these exercises together, and there is a bit of power in numbers. At this point, I had also obtained for myself a pair of red tights, which I could wear when I was competing. My red tights and my little red top. I looked pretty ridiculous, I'm sure, but I felt like I fit in. And as I said, I made the Olympic team kind of out of nowhere. And I was in 9th grade, so I had to miss school because the Winter Olympics are in February. And I didn't have a passport, so there was that. I didn't have a spare pair of skates, so there was also that. But you know, over time, because I had learned to be proficient and learned to kind of look after myself, I was really pretty undaunted. I'm just like, you know, we drove to Chicago, we got me a passport, we put me on the plane. See ya. I can't imagine doing that with my children in the States. Like, there she goes. And if they knew the people they were trusting me with, would not have been good, because it wasn't really set up for, you know, guidance, let's put it that way. Friends of my parents would ask them all the time, how do you get her to train? And my mother would say, how do we get her to stop? And so a lot of times when people ask me about my kids, both of my kids are very successful elite athletes. My daughter Kelsey is an elite cross-country skier. She's just back from training with the national team in New Zealand. My son, as I'm sure many of you know, is a well-known 3-time Olympian in cycling. You know, how do you get them to do that? You don't get your children to do that. You just hold on, right? You just try to keep up. You follow their passion, and I think that's the biggest thing. If I could leave, I'm a little bit older crowd here, but there's some parents of young children or grandparents, and you know, really, if I could leave you with a thought on parenting, it would be absolutely 100% follow their lead, because they know and they need you to take them next level. But I digress. I don't have a clock going. We good? Okay. So we're good. We could just go all night. But I want to tell you a couple of things about how I ended up in cycling and how I came to Boulder. So I got injured speed skating. It was back in the day when we didn't have access to good physical therapy, and I had a chronic tendonitis, which I just ignored because I thought surely the problem was in my head, and it was just my head telling me I didn't want to train, so I just kept training. And until I couldn't, and you know, speed skating, we're not that smart. We only go around one way. We go around to the left. This is very hard on our left ankle. And so after a time, my left ankle gave out. In fact, it gave out 1 week before the Olympic trials in 1976. And so I didn't make the Olympic team when I was supposed to. Happens. And I couldn't really move my ankle side to side, but I could move my ankle up and down. Perfect for cycling. But it's 1976, and guess what? There aren't that many opportunities for girls in cycling. But still, I like to ride my bike. I liked the group of people I got in with. I had the same kind of first race experience where I went to race my first race and I stood on the starting line, I put my foot in the pedal, I pulled the toe strap. Are we all remembering toe straps? And I stood there and it was freezing cold on the lakefront in April. Why was I there? I was shaking, I was so nervous, it was my first race. And I got off balance and I fell on the person next to me and took them all down like a domino. I was mortified. But I did not go to the car and cry. I went out and raced. And I found that I really liked cycling. Cycling's a forgiving sport. Much more forgiving than speed skating, and generally speaking, in much better weather, right? So when I first came to Boulder, it was for the bike race, 1977, when the Red Zinger was just in its infancy, really, and it was just such a cool town. How many people were here in 77? Yeah, it was a cool town. It was, you know, I was definitely a hippie from the Midwest, and when I came here, I just felt like I just fit in. Nobody really, you know, judged you or questioned what you were doing, and they all came out to watch you race, and they didn't think you were that crazy. Well, they might have thought we were crazy, but it was a great place to be, and I feel lucky that I discovered Boulder, and that I had an excuse to come back every summer to the bike race. And it really wasn't until Davis and I got together in 1980 that I realized that Boulder would be my home if I wanted to be with this guy, because he wasn't leaving Boulder. And so I've been here ever since. And in 1983, when I broke my arm at the Coors Classic on one of the first days, the Red Zinger had become the Coors Classic, as all things will change. We had a huge crowd down in front of the post office. I crashed, broke my arm, and I had to quit the race. And I didn't realize how many people supported me until I was out training after that time, and people would be hanging out of their cars, and as opposed to today when they're hanging out of their cars and they're not being very nice to you usually, or they're trying to get a picture with their cell phone or texting somebody, they would actually cheer for me, you know, come on, Connie, you can do it. Glad you're coming back. And I just, you know, I had never really realized how much impact the race and the community was having on me until that time, really. And that kind of takes me, you know, in the video that you saw, I talk about how women's cycling took a step backwards. And I think it's taken a huge step backward. If 1984 was the first time women's cycling was included in the Olympics, it was also the first time women were included at the Tour de France. That went away within 5 years. Another Boulder person, by the way, redhead, Marianne Martin, won that first Tour de France for women. That went away. That was very short-lived. And why was that? You know, I've thought about that a lot. Like, what happened to women's cycling? Because we were really riding a wave, and then all of a sudden we kind of went over the deep side. And you're not going to be surprised with my answer. It was Donald Trump. I'm not joking. In 1989, Donald Trump sponsored a bike race. In fact, in 1988, that was the last edition of this Coors Classic, this big, great race we had in Colorado. Died in 1988. In 1989, it was reborn as Tour de Trump. I'm not joking. This sounds like a Doonesbury cartoon, I know. Tour de Trump. And guess what? It didn't include women. Had national TV, It had pro. They spent a lot of money bringing pros in from Europe. And that was really the beginning of about 2 decades of a stalemate, of a stalling out for women's cycling. Now, the Donald only stayed in the sport for 2 years because he does that. Some of you are hoping he will only be president for 2 years. I know your type. Wishful thinking. But I just thought I'd throw that out there because that's my theory. And when I told the guys that when they were making the film, I said, you can't put that in the film. But I can tell you, right? Yes. So I'm going to give you a chance to think about maybe if you have some questions, but I'm going to finish my part of the talk anyway with this past summer in Dusseldorf, where the start of the Tour de France was, because Dusseldorf is part of France. They call it the Paris of Germany. It might be, but it was raining. So on the first day, Davis and I were there, and we wanted to see Taylor. You know, our son had been racing a long time. He'd had a really catastrophic accident. This was a big day for him to be starting in the Tour de France. Davis competed in 4 tours. We wanted to be there to see him start. So there we were in the NBC booth, and it's pouring rain, and we're like, oh my God, you know, what's going to happen? And he came through. There was a time trial on the first day. It was just, how long was it? 15K. So it was a short time trial, 10 miles. And he came through the first checkpoint in a really good spot, just 3 or 4 seconds off the lead, and I started jumping up and down. I did make almost that much noise because we were in the, again, I mean, I'm attracted to these announcers' booths, so we're in the announcers' booth, and it's kind of a trailer, and there's people underneath going, oh my God, what's happened? And meanwhile, the on-air guy, whose name I really don't know, who was working with Bob and Chris, was looking at me like, and I was so nervous because, you know, we'd seen a bunch of the guys crash, and then Taylor didn't crash, but then we didn't see him, we didn't know what was happening, and then he came through, and he was 12th. Safe. Okay, so we were happy. And our plan, because we didn't want to follow the whole Tour de France, it's really hard to follow the Tour de France, was to fly down to his home in Girona and watch most of the Tour de France on you know, the same time zone, but be close, and then go in and out of a few stages. So we had a flight later the next day, which was the first stage of the Tour de France, which was from Dusseldorf, remember the Paris of Germany, to Liège. We're still not in France, we're in Belgium. The Tour de France, remember. And they were expecting 5 million people on the course. So we're like, well, we're not going to go, you know, follow that. It's going to be a cluster. There's way too many people. We'll go watch it on TV. But in fact, I thought I was so smart. I thought we'd see the start, jump on the plane, and be in Barcelona in time to catch the finish. So we're walking back out from the start, and we look up at the big screen, and my daughter's texting me like crazy because she was in Norway training, and she's like, Taylor's already in a breakaway. Taylor attacked in the first road stage of the Tour de France, in his first start in the Tour de France, in the first 50 meters of the first stage of a 200-kilometer race. What? What? So we were with 2 other friends, and I said, okay, I'm going to call an audible here, guys. We're going to rent a car and drive to Liège. And they just look at me like, are you nuts? And I'm like, come on, he's in the breakaway. Like, no, we're going to go get the plane. You again. So we got on the plane was late, we had our cell coverage, the race was coming near the end, Taylor was leading, he was in a group. We're just like, oh my God, I'm like hitting these guys. If he wins the race and we're not there, I'm gonna kill you. He didn't win the race, Phinney's still alive. But the best part about it was, not only one of the best parts was that he got the King of the Mountain jersey, which is why I'm wearing polka dots today. And I think he might possibly be the largest Tour de France polka dot jersey wearer ever, right? So yeah, Mom always gets the goodies. And he didn't win, but there was no disappointment in it. And especially since I've been home, everybody's congratulated me on his win. I just love revisionist history. That's why I'm here. Anyway, questions?
You also row on Lake Mendota?
I left that part out because I think I was running like a little long. I did row. I didn't actually row on Lake Mendota. That's the lake in Madison. But I went to Cal Berkeley and I rowed on the crew when I went to Cal. And rowing is, do you row? It's the only sport you can sit down and go backwards. Great sport. I had a great time. It was a great college sport. But yeah, I did that for 2 years at Cal Berkeley. It was the only time in my life where I've been considered really diminutive. That's ridiculous. I saw the women that won the 8 at the in London, and I took a photo with them. I really wish I had it here because one of the women was from Castle Rock. She was also a tailor. My son is tailor, she's tailor. I'm like, this would be a good match. My son's 6'5", you're 6'3", and man, big and strong. But yes, I did. I rode. Yeah, I did that too. Yeah, did a lot of things. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the work of the foundation?
The work of the foundation. Well, unfortunately, Davis has Parkinson's disease, and he was diagnosed in the year 2000. Let me stand up. Get up here. And got dragged kicking and screaming into starting a foundation. And so much of it was because of what we learned from my mom, who, by the way, my mom passed away 30 years ago today. And she, as you can tell, she was a real force in my life. And it's hard to imagine I've lived now half my life without her. But she's always with me. So she did have MS. She was diagnosed when I was 5. And so at that time, there wasn't a lot to be done for people with MS. And she was always telling us the cure was around the corner, which it wasn't. Better care was around the corner. But she didn't have much information how to live with the disease. And I think when Davis was diagnosed, we decided, because Michael J. Fox Foundation was doing a great job in research, that we would focus our efforts on wellness and living well today. And there's several people from the foundation here today. You guys raise your hands. Thank you for being here. We're a Boulder-based foundation, and we give hope and inspiration and a lot of solid advice. And just came out with another, we have a free manual we give if you know anybody who has Parkinson's. It's a really great, the work of the foundation is the best work that we do, that we've ever done, I think. So so thanks, Bill, for mentioning that. Carl? Yeah.
When I think of your family, I think of resilience. It seems like you've instilled that in your kids. What words do you have for us, maybe as parents or grandparents, to instill resilience in kids?
Resilience, yeah. I don't know, you think resilience is something in your DNA or something in your, I think resilience, it's such a great question. I think we as humans, so first of all, we as humans are all extraordinary, right? I mean, we all have some capacity within us that makes us special and doesn't, rely solely on a result of a bike race 30-some years ago. I think we're all extraordinary. A lot of us don't know how extraordinary we are until we're tested. And so as athletes, we test ourselves as cyclists, we test ourselves in a really brutal sport, but we love it. And you know, it's in our nature to push. And you see this a lot. Like if there's something that you love to do and you're striving to be better, then resilience comes from the practice and the belief that resilience comes from today was bad, tomorrow will be better. You know, it comes from knowing that it can be better, that you can help to make it better, and that you have the tools to make it better. So I think with our kids, we've certainly seen them have their trials and tribulations, and we have to support them more when they're not doing well than when they're doing well, right? There was a time when my daughter was only calling me when things weren't going well, and I was like, could you just call me when things are going right? Just now and then. So she's really made a conscious effort to do that because there's so much going right. But we forget about that too, and it's human nature. Well, I talk to caregiver groups a lot about the whole process of rewiring our brain to focus on the good things. It's too easy in this culture with all this bad information and all this bad news we get every day to really mire yourself in all that bad news. That's not productive. It's not productive for your family, for your neighbor, for your community. And I'm all about community first. You know, I think that we should support Boulder as best we can because it's hard, you know, to take it out to that next level. So support your neighbors, support your friends, support your children. And resiliency, that's human nature, I think. Is it? I think it is.
That was a good answer.
So, anything else? Dying to know? Yep. Go, Lenny.
So how was it that you ended up becoming so passionate about the Olympics then, given that you saw it in '68? I mean, my understanding was that's why you started rowing too, because cycling wasn't a women's.
No, that wasn't why I started rowing. How did I become passionate about the Olympics? Speed skating had an Olympic component, you know, like people were training for the Olympics. I'm like, yeah, hey, I'm training for the Olympics. I was 13, 14 years old. I was just skating around in circles. I mean, you know, I wasn't really thinking about any wider passion, but ironically, so I go to the Olympics when I'm 14, and my roommate's 16, and she wins a gold medal and retires the next day. And my other roommate didn't win in Sapporo, but she won 3 in the next Olympics. So, you know, some of my friends made it look really easy. And those of you maybe who followed my son, you know, in London, he finished 4th in 2 events, and people would look at you like, oh, the poor dear. And I'm like, really? I mean, he just did like, talk about extraordinary, and you know, but you know, oh, that's too bad. Know who Ryan Lochte is, the swimmer? Yeah. So I was giving a talk in London after Taylor had gotten 2 fourths at one of the sponsor houses, and I was doing it with Ryan Lochte's mother. This was before he caused all the trouble in Rio, but I wasn't that surprised about that. But anyway, Google it if you don't know what I'm talking about. The guy is an idiot. And so, I mean, nothing short of that. But so I'm standing there with his mother, and she was very puffed up about all of his wins and stuff. I said, well, you know, when I raced, I only had 1 race, so technically I batted 1,000. And Ryan hadn't been beating Michael Phelps, so, you know, there was that. And some of us don't get 12 events at the Olympics. But at the same time, I said, there's no shame in 4th place. There is no shame in 4th place.
Or 5th.
Or 5th. Actually, one of Davis's teammates, when Davis got in the road race at the Olympics, Davis was 5th. And in the time trial a week later, he was 3rd, which is a medal. But but when Taylor got 4th in London, one of his teammates immediately texted him, you got 1 better than you. People have really long memories. So I brought my gold medal. If you guys want to play with it, jump around, put it on your necks, do whatever you want. I did bring it. I bring it to kids groups. I knew this wasn't going to be a kid group. Kind of a big kid group. But I'll just put it up here. Yeah. Thank you. Support the museum. Oh, Peter, go. Last question.
To what degree do you think your mom's MS drove you to
Yeah.
explore your disability?
Peter is my nephew, so he's talking about his his grandma.
His
Grandma.
grandma.
His grandma, sorry. Yeah, grandma, sorry. You know, they do say that a lot of athletes are motivated by things in the family. And I used to say that I thought that I wanted to run fast because my mom couldn't. I don't know if that's true, but she sure supported me. And nobody wrote a book about how to, especially in the 70s, what do you do with this prodigal child in a sport like speed skating? You know, just love them, support them, find out how to get them through school. And my mother did all of that and gave me a lot of freedom. So yeah, I think there's some of that, but I think it was also just that my parents kind of knew when to get out of the way too. And I'm still learning that part. It's hard for me to get out of the way. You know that. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you. Thanks for coming tonight.